The past 200 years in the West have seen staggering increases in wealth and economic opportunity. And yet, there have been no comparable increases in our level of happiness. Despite being so much richer than a few generations ago, we're often more anxious about our own importance and achievements than our grandparents were. I call this modern state of restlessness and dissatisfaction status anxiety. I want to explain where I think much of it has come from, how it affects our lives, and what I believe we could do about it. If we're surprised that being richer hasn't made us happy and secure, it's because we don't understand the psychology of satisfaction.
When do we feel we have enough? What enables us to feel prosperous and content? Chiefly a comparison with other people. But it's not good enough to compare ourselves to people who are very remote from us in time and place. It's not going to help anyone to feel very rich to be told that they have infinitely more money than one of their medieval ancestors who lived in a mud-walled cottage. We only feel content when we compare ourselves to people who are like us, our friends and colleagues, our neighbours. In short, the sense of being a success is all relative.
No one spends much time resenting the Queen or Bill Gates, but we're liable to get extremely resentful if someone we think is basically just like us moves into a bigger house or gets a slightly better job. We most envy people who we take to be our equals.
The modern world is based around the idea that we're all essentially equal. Not necessarily financially equal, but equal in terms of rights and opportunities. It's a lovely idea, which brings with it one nasty side effect. In a world in which you could believe that those at the top belonged to an inherently superior caste, you didn't need to feel humiliated by anything you didn't have. You might detest those who had more than you, but you didn't need to feel ashamed or anxious. But in a world in which everyone is supposed to be equal, but where there's still a lot of inequality around, it's hard not to take the achievements of others as an implicit reproach for everything you don't have and haven't done.
The best place to go to understand all this is the country where the idea of equality first took hold some 200 years ago, America.
Young, ready, and hungry.
In 1776, America had a revolution which changed the world.
Help us to discover the secrets to our dream.
The new democracy abolished the rigid, class-based hierarchies of Europe.
Just say to yourself every day, it's possible.
From the first, this basic sense of equality energized America, but it also, quite unintentionally, increased Americans' anxieties about what their true place was.
You can't tell me nothing about this subject because I was poor, but I'm blessed that I ain't poor now.
Their anxieties were destined to become our anxieties. The person who first and perhaps best understood the problem of modern equality was a young French aristocrat called Alexis de Tocqueville. In 1831, he came to America in order to study what he called the future shape and temperament of the world.
When de Tocqueville travelled to America, the Europe he was leaving behind was still essentially an aristocratic society, run along feudal lines. This was a world in which you tended to accept the status that you'd been born into. But in America, everything was different. This was a democracy, and here you could change your status according to your luck or your talent. De Tocqueville, writing about his journey, later wrote that what he'd come to see in America was the future, and what he saw when he got there left him both impressed and frightened for all of us.
De Tocqueville distilled the experiences of his 9-month journey into a book called Democracy in America. It's eerie, following in his footsteps 170 years later, to see just how prescient he was. He foresaw the problems that would arise when the old social hierarchies based on class were abolished. There would be no limits to what we could legitimately expect from life.
De Tocqueville was struck at how wealthy ordinary Americans were. They enjoyed a standard of living far superior to that of their counterparts in old Europe. But de Tocqueville noticed something else, perhaps more interesting, that despite their affluence, they constantly wanted ever more, and felt great envy at anyone who had something that they didn't.
In a chapter of his book entitled Why the Americans Are Often So Restless in the Midst of Their Prosperity, de Tocqueville analysed the relationship between equality and a gnawing sense of envy.
So where are we now? What's this house?
This is the Delaware model.
Which is what? How does it fit into the range of models?
It is a very popular model. I would say that this model is on the larger end, not our smallest and not our largest.
And does it come with all this furniture?
The young Frenchman was immediately intrigued by the houses Americans built. I was surprised to perceive along the shore a number of little palaces of white marble, several of which were of ancient architecture. When I went the next day to inspect more closely, I found that the walls were of whitewashed brick and the columns of painted wood. In the confusion of all ranks, everyone hopes to appear what he is not.
And this is you said the colonial style?
This is a pretty traditional two-story colonial with...
Is that a Doric column or...?
Those are our decorator columns to enhance the room, where we put a mirror back there, which is also a decorator touch.
Right.
De Tocqueville said, "When inequality is the general rule in society, the greatest inequalities attract no attention. But when everything is more or less level, the slightest variation is noticed. That's the reason for the strange melancholy often haunting the inhabitants of democracies in the midst of abundance, and of that disgust with life, sometimes gripping them even in calm and easy circumstances."
Is this real stone?
That's called a non-standard option.
Joni Hartley works for Washington Homes. Their slogan is, "Making the American Dream Affordable."
Is that a standard piece, do you know? Is that
Oh, no. Above the door,
Right,
no. That is a decorator item.
Right.
In a society of equals, it's natural for people to want what others have. Between 1970 and now, the proportion of Americans who defined the things in this store as necessities rose continuously. 3% in 1970 thought a second television essential. Now it's 75%. There have been equivalent increases in the numbers feeling they need the other products here at Best Buy. This relentless process from luxury to decency to psychological necessity had been noticed by de Tocqueville. He thought it explained why the Americans' greater wealth would not necessarily make them happier.
The reason was that all barriers to social expectation had been removed in the United States. In America, wrote de Tocqueville, "I never met a citizen too poor not to be able to glance with hope and envy at the pleasures of the rich."
Move into a better house, get a better car, buy better clothes.
Poor citizens, de Tocqueville noticed, compare themselves with rich ones and trust that they too will one day follow in their footsteps.
My son wants to look just like everybody else. If they're sporting Michael Jordans, he got to sport them too. So if I say, no, I can't get them for you, what is this child going to do? It's gonna go out there and rob somebody, maybe steal, kill, or whatever to get it.
Some people from humble backgrounds do become very rich in America. But, unlike the poor of aristocratic societies, low-status Americans are prone to view their condition as nothing less than a betrayal of their expectations.
The differences between democratic and aristocratic societies came out particularly well, Tocqueville thought, in the differing mindsets of servants under the two different systems. In aristocratic societies, Tocqueville argued that servants tended to accept their fates with good grace. They didn't feel there was anything humiliating in being a restaurant manager or waiting on tables. In democratic societies, however, the atmosphere of the press and public opinion relentlessly suggested to all citizens that they could become anything on earth that they wanted to be. However, as time passed and the majority of people failed to realize their dreams, they fell prey to a kind of bitterness and a sense of despair, and their hatred of themselves and their masters grew fierce.
I met Blaise Pugh at Freddy's, the restaurant where he works. Though just around the corner from the Pentagon, it has a Key West feel. But it's not where Blaise wants to be.
Coffee, anything else?
He has set his sights on being a TV chat show host.
I'm a fun person. I'm a lot of fun. I'd like to be on television every damn day.
Really? Every day?
Yeah.
Every night?
Every night.
With your own show?
Anywhere between 9 and 11 would be fine.
Well, no, you can't. No, you can't sit there
Why
yet.
not?
Well, I need to spray it with Lysol. We had a naked model in here this morning who had her naked crotch on there.
Why do you need to spray it?
Well,
She's a filthy woman.
we don't know where she was last night.
I have an idea.
Thank you very much.
Blaise's agent, Dorothy, had got wind of a job for him. I rushed round.
Blaise is here today to do a headshot. He's got a casting call in New York next week. If they like his look, which we hope they do, they're looking for a character type of dude. And if they like him, it's a possible $40,000 job.
What's your ambition, Blaise?
Just to be instantly recognized.
But for what?
Famous for being famous.
Famous for being
isn't it?
famous, but not necessarily for anything particular.
Exactly.
Great.
Just famous for being
a
famous.
character.
And Dorothy, do you think that could happen? Do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Are you guys familiar with
Sure.
Dateline? They voted him Personality of the Week 8 years ago.
Failure's not something. It's not an option. Somebody once said to me, "What happens if you don't fail?" Well, I won't know because I'll probably be dead trying.
Do your Sean Connery, you did. Do Sean. That's been a
It's
couple
been a
of years
while.
ago.
Let's see. Miss Moneypit? No.
Miss Moneypenny.
I know. Well, no. Well, Miss Moneypenny, I'm so glad. No. As long as the day is here, I look for Moneypenny wherever I can go. Well, that's not.
You did a
bad.
terrific job.
When I next met Blaise, he proved difficult to recognize at first.
Roncom's offering 20% off today. Hello? Roncom is having a sale, and I'm just out promoting Roncom. Anybody got a cigarette? Roncom's offering 20% off. Come on, give me 20% now. Let's
The
get
rigid,
off the list.
hierarchical system of almost every Western society until the 18th century was unjust in 1,000 ways.
Roncom's having a sale across the street.
But it did offer those on the lower rungs one notable freedom. The freedom not to have to compare their achievements with so many more successful people's, and so find themselves inadequate as a result.
Roncom's having a sale today.
Do you ever think when you're doing this kind of work, do you ever sort of think, you know, maybe I should just accept that maybe I won't make it to the next level?
No.
And maybe I should just accept that, you know, life in the restaurant business is my lot.
But it's not where I'm supposed to be.
But do you ever despair? Do you ever just say, I should just accept really that what I am is a restaurant manager. I'm not Johnny Carson. I'm not David Letterman. I'm a sponge.
I can't because I am. They just don't know it yet.
We're all more like Blaise than we care to admit.
Hello?
We torment ourselves with comparisons between our lives and the lives of those a few rungs up the ladder. It obviously does not make us any happier. Why are we so unable to curtail our painful aspirations?
Ron Cobb's having a sale across the street.
It isn't just comparisons with others which stop us feeling content. It's also what we demand of ourselves.
So find some reasons that can keep you strong when you want to give up.
We're all now expected to succeed.
Here's what I want you to repeat after me, please, with power and conviction. Say, it's possible.
Les Brown is one of America's top motivational speakers. He was flying in that evening to meet me. Something about the prospect made me feel lethargic, even desperate.
I say, hello, Mr. Butterball, how are you?
Les, how are you?
How are you doing, Al?
How was your flight?
Young, ready, and hungry.
That's why I got into it, because I love to connect with people. Right.
One of the sort of paradoxical things of watching your tapes, reading your material, is that it's incredibly optimistic. But watching it has kind of made me feel that I'm kind of a loser because I haven't achieved as much as I might have done.
I do that. I don't want you to sleep at night, particularly if you have not been living up to your potential.
Does it frustrate you when you meet people who you feel are not living to their full potential?
Oh, absolutely not. When I see those kind of people, I look at them and I check them out and see what kind of physical fitness they're in. They perhaps would be very good in cleaning my house, washing my dishes, driving me around, cleaning my clothes, cutting my grass. Some people choose a life of mediocrity. That's your choice. There are people who decide, I don't want to do anything but what I'm doing. I want to do drugs. I want to be an alcoholic. I want to be worthless. I want to be no good. I want to be a criminal. People make choices.
But what about those people who say, I don't want to be a criminal, I want to be a chief executive, etc., but they happen to be a criminal, or they happen to be a drug addict?
They don't happen to be, they have chosen to become that.
So whatever you are in life, you've chosen it.
Wherever you are at some point in time, you made an appointment to be there.
But this very tough philosophy, one could say that actually you've been a very privileged man.
Privileged?
You've been a very privileged man.
How so?
Well, you were born into a loving family. You were born with gifts. The gift for public speaking, a very quick mind, a very intelligent mind. These are gifts.
I didn't start out like this. I was not an orator. I trained myself. I never had any college training. I saw a guy speaking and I said, hey, I think I'd like to do that.
How much money have you made, Les?
Over $37 million.
In how long?
18 years.
You've got to continue to work on yourself personally, to work on yourself professionally. You got to be hungry.
I think my basic feeling with Les is that he's very inspiring. Obviously, you come away from his company feeling like this is really someone who could help you to make your life, make your millions, etc. But I suppose there remains a dark undercurrent of all this, that it raises your anxiety levels. You think, I should be so much more than I am. And in many ways, I think that life simply isn't as flexible as Les makes out. And I think that the old resignation to one's condition is obviously negative in all sorts of ways, but it can also be quite calming. It helps you to accommodate yourself with what could be quite harsh and quite unbudgeable conditions of life. So I think there's a real benefit sometimes to an approach that sees life as essentially a cruel joke.
Our expectations for our lives have grown exponentially in the democratic age. A philosopher who thought deeply about what that might mean for human happiness was Jean-Jacques Rousseau, an eccentric, shrill, but unsettlingly persuasive 18th century Frenchman.
Rousseau had a fascinating idea about what it is to be wealthy. Being wealthy isn't just a question of having lots of money, it's a question of having what we want. Wealth isn't an absolute, it's relative to desire. Every time we seek something that we can't afford, we can be counted as poor, however much money we may actually have. And every time we're satisfied with what we have, we can be counted as rich, however little we may actually possess.
There are two ways to make people richer, reasoned Rousseau: to give them more money or to restrain their desires. Modern societies have succeeded spectacularly at the first option. But by continuously inflaming our appetites, they have at the same time helped to negate their own most impressive achievements. This analysis led Rousseau to one of his most provocative ideas, his concept of the noble savage. Rousseau argued that the so-called uncivilized peoples who lived in the forests, in the language of the day, savages, were not just morally better than the corrupted inhabitants of cities like Washington, D.C., they might also be happier. Modern societies might actually leave us feeling more deprived than primitive ones, where people contented themselves, in Rousseau's words, playing with crude musical instruments or using sharp-edged stones to make a fishing canoe.
I think it's possibly quite easy to dismiss Rousseau's ideas as a piece of romantic fantasy. But if so many people in the 18th century took these ideas so seriously, I think it's because they had before them one stark example of many of its apparent truths, in the shape of the fate of the North American Indians.
It's a picture of my grandfather and my grandmother and my aunt.
Warren Cook is deputy chief of what remains of the Pamunkey tribe, once led by the mighty Powhatan, king of Virginia and father of Pocahontas.
This is another picture of my aunt. I don't know why she has a gun, but probably going to get an Englishman.
Reports of Native American life from the 16th century onwards had described it as materially simple but psychologically rewarding. Communities were close-knit, egalitarian, religious, playful, and martial.
Well, we have here how the people sort of dressed and what they sort of look like. These are called John White's drawings. And then, of course, a little bit of the music and the flutes and the rattlers.
So
and
incredibly simple instruments.
Oh, of course, everything. You're talking about very primitive people, of course.
Within only a few decades of the arrival of the white man, the technology and luxury of European industry had awed the Native Americans.
When the English came over, everything, of course, changed. The native people wanted the thing that the English people had.
Do you think before the English came, they were more or less happy with what they had? I mean, they had a very simple life. What's your sense of...
Well, of course they were happy. They didn't know any better. They couldn't be unhappy because they didn't know what they didn't have.
I once read a letter between two English merchants saying the problem with the Indian tribes is that many of them don't want enough things. And then the other merchant said, yeah, but if you try and interest them in Venetian beads, they'll love those.
Well, everything was new. They would flash something new and exciting, and they had never seen before.
Their new possessions didn't appear to make the Indians much happier. Rates of suicide and alcoholism spiraled, and communities fractured. The tribal chiefs would have known what Rousseau was talking about.
How much land did the tribe have?
Well, you can say what is just about all of Virginia.
All of Virginia?
Yeah, plus more.
And now it's got
1,100 and some acres, that's about it.
And do you think the culture they've put in this place, I mean, we drove through, on the way here, through endless strip malls, Walmart, you know, KFCs, all these big brands. That's the culture that's replaced the Native American culture. I mean, what do you think of the new American culture?
You got 10 times more things to be anxious about now.
What are we anxious about now?
We anxious about everything. You know, we got all these psychological problems. We got Prozac kids, Prozac women,
but in the old
Prozac men.
But surely they're sure.
Well, you lost maybe just a simpler type of life without the anxiety.
The Indians ceased listening to the quiet voices that spoke of the modest pleasures of community and of the beauty of the empty canyons at dusk. And that, thought Rousseau, was what we'd all done.
I get angry when you read about it. You know, you go back and kind of relive what the poor people went through. I get mad at that.
When you meet an English person now, you feel angry or you forgive them?
You're English?
Yeah. So I'm asking nervously.
Would you like to swim? Do you love to swim?
You gonna throw me in?
It was an American psychologist, William James, who first explored from a psychological angle the particular problems that societies create for themselves when they start raising huge expectations in their citizens. And James illustrates this kind of fascinating dynamic between expectations and fulfillment in a kind of theory that he writes. He says that our self-esteem, that thing that we're all searching for, self-esteem, is the result of two things: success, the number of things that we're successful at, over expectation, the number of things that we expect to be successful at. And really what he's saying by this is that in order to have high self-esteem, you can do two things: either become more successful or lower the number of things that you expect to be successful at. And the problem, James says, of modern American societies and also Western European is that they're constantly placing us under huge pressures to succeed. They're constantly raising the level of our expectations, and in so doing, they're making self-esteem a very elusive thing indeed.
Every rise in our levels of expectation entails a rise in the risks of humiliation. And if we do fail, how much sympathy can we expect from other people when the system seems bent on removing every excuse we might have for our failures?
I worry about trying to survive, trying to make it, you know, just working hard, trying to provide for my kids, trying to keep a nice home over their head and make sure, because in our society today, it's hard.
Move into a better house, get a better car, buy better clothes, and then when God gets finished, tell him to give you the mic and let you testify.
Things will never have that big house I see in the TV.
You've got to decide to be relentless. You've got to decide never to give up. You got to be hungry.
If you're rich, you're rich. If you're poor, you're poor. It's not, you know, and then if you're in between, you got to strive to stay where you're at, or you're going to fall under.
God is sick and tired of his people looking like lemons in the face. He wants you to enjoy your life.
I worry about my safety. You know, I'm a young black man. Most young black males either dead or locked up. You know, that's horrible. I don't want to have to worry about that. You know what I mean? That's not living to me. That's not living at all. You know? See, the only time, a lot of times I would be able to get on camera is if I was coming out of court. You know what I mean? Or something else.
The street those are the African-American Civil War Memorial. Doors open outside.
No country embodies the meritocratic ideal like America. It is, we're constantly being told, a wide-open country where anyone who works hard can succeed. This constant striving can disturb the mental calm of people who are, to all intents and purposes, rich. But it has also changed their attitudes towards the poor.
Of course, America isn't a meritocracy. You only have to look around you to see that the system is weighted in favor of certain groups and massively weighted against others. You only have to remember the issue of race. Yet the key point is that Americans perceive that their society is in fact meritocratic. And there's a cruel logic to the whole idea of a meritocracy. Because if you genuinely believe that those at the top merit their success, you have to believe that those at the bottom must merit their failure.
Jenny Lamont begs by the side of the road to feed her 2 children. What do you think when you see people like her? Do you think they've been unlucky? Or do you tend to assume that they have in some way brought it on themselves, that they're losers even?
I think a lot of the middle-class people and people that have money, yeah, they look down on you. When rich people come, they'll be rolling their windows up, or they won't even pull their car up next to you. They don't want to have anything to do with you.
So who are the people who help you most?
Mexicans, Indian women, and a lot of women.
Why do you think that is?
Because they've been there, and they know that you wouldn't be out there if you didn't need it. Thank you so much, ma'am. God bless you. Thank you. You have a nice day, ma'am. Thank you so My husband and I were together for 26 years, and my husband recently died. I was a bookkeeper for a small company. I worked there 7 years, and I lost my job. I came home from work. He was in a coma on the couch. Called the ambulance. They took him to the hospital. He died September 11th, 02 of the year anniversary of the plane crash. And I went into a real bad depression because I was still at my job at that time.
And at that point, you lived in a nice house?
I had my own apartment, 3-bedroom apartment, but I couldn't pay the rent, so I just recently got evicted, and I have to be out on the 13th of this month.
So where are you living now?
My father-in-law has let me stay in his basement. Well, when you need to feed your kids, you do anything. It's very degrading going out there, but it's how I feed my kids. So I don't care what the people said to me, or if they yelled at me, or anything. Thank you so much, ma'am. God bless you. Thank you so very much. They don't know my story, so they don't know what's going on in my life.
Are you surprised by what's happened to you when you look back on your life? Are you shocked? How do you think about what's happened to you?
I try not to because I get depressed, you know, because everything I had, it was great. My life was great. And I kind of lost it, like, within a month. Everything was gone.
From the middle of the 19th century, especially in the United States, perceptions of the relative virtues of the poor and the wealthy began to change. The possession of money began to seem less like a fortunate blessing and more like proof of moral superiority. I felt a bit nervous about meeting Grover Norquist. He's one of Washington's most prominent neoconservative lobbyists.
Can you make sure the front desk does not put calls through?
So what do you see as the most fundamental ideas about American society and the economy?
Well, it based the United States from day one was founded on the basis that anybody could do and be anything he wanted to. Didn't matter who your parents were, it didn't matter what they did. That you were in charge of your own future. And there's no ceiling, and there's no floor. You want to be a bum, you can be a bum. You want to accomplish great things, you can do that. It's up to you. The state's responsibilities are to provide for a free and open and just society, to execute murderers and otherwise leave people alone.
Why shouldn't the state help the needy?
Because to do that, you would have to steal money from people who earned it and give it to people who didn't. And then you make the state into a thief.
Why is it theft?
To take money that you didn't earn?
Could
you give me 1 second? Damon! Damon? Whatever you're doing, shouting over there, it comes right through the walls. Could you make sure people are quiet? Because we're getting noise louder than just talking noises through the walls.
You're suggesting that taxation is theft?
Taxation beyond the legitimate requirements of providing for justice is theft, sure.
It strikes me that there's a lot less guilt towards the underprivileged in American society compared to in European society. Why do you think that might be?
If you believe that somebody's property and wealth is not necessarily legitimately earned because he's an earl or a duke, or he got it from his great-great-great-great-grandfather who stole it from the Normans or the Saxons or something, well then wealth, in the Proudhon, property is theft. And in Europe, a lot of property was theft. Okay. In the United States, because we take so many immigrants, it's a little hard to argue that you can't succeed when you see, 5-year-old Cambodian children coming out of the killing fields of Cambodia, becoming the best speller in the country at age 12. Okay, that person could do it, and you're telling me that you can't get out of bed in the morning and go to work because life is unfair?
Do you think it's nicer to be poor in Europe than it is in the United States?
nicer. I don't know, maybe less dignity if the government's willing to do more for you. When people give you money for not working, it's destructive of human dignity and eventually destructive of human liberty. It turns people into lazy folks who don't want to accomplish anything and just sort of sit around. Why would you want to have anything to do with that?
I don't believe in the American dream. You know, I really don't. I think that's just words, you know?
In America, it became possible for the first time to argue that the rung of the ladder each person stood on accurately reflected their true qualities. Conveniently for the successful, this reduced the need for welfare, redistribution of wealth, or even simple compassion. Given this relentless logic, voices like Grover's will only grow louder.
Damon!
If you met someone who was very successful in every way, had lots of fame, money, respect, and you asked them why they were successful, and they said, well, it's just good luck, you'd think they were being unduly modest. Similarly, if you met someone who was a failure in every way, no job, no money, no respect, and you asked them what had happened, and they said it was just bad luck, you'd think they were trying to hide something. Essentially, luck has disappeared as a plausible explanation for what happens to people in their life. Winners make their own luck, is the punishing modern mantra.
And yet, for all our unwillingness to put much faith in luck, we are in important ways more at the mercy of forces beyond our control than ever before. The globalized economy has brought great rewards to its winners, but it's also constantly creating large numbers of losers. In traditional societies, high status and the respect it brings may have been inordinately hard to acquire, but they were also pleasantly hard to lose. Modern societies have sought to make status dependent on achievement, primarily financial achievement. But the nature of the economy that those societies have created is making that achievement ever more precarious. Bethlehem Steel outside Baltimore was once the largest steelworks in the world. Now, all but one of its furnaces lie rusting, its workforce down from 32,000 to 2,000. Joe Rozelle has worked there all his professional life.
You know, there's always been a sense of pride in the steel industry. A lot of the people in the steel industry are patriotic. People, you know, enlisted in the Army. We were doing a lot of work that would, you know, built American. People knew that.
I thought I'd be able to retire here like my father. I'm a second generation. My father worked right here in this mill.
We're on a slippery slope now. We could be here today, gone tomorrow. We just don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty.
For most of us, our work is the chief determinant of the amount of respect and care we will be granted. The globalized economy is making that work more unstable, opening up an anxiety-inducing gap between what we need and what the world will give us.
Constant pressure from imported steel coming into the country has made these jobs very precarious in terms of, are they going to last? Are you going to be able to get to your retirement? Are you going to get your pension or not? No matter what it seems that we do to make ourselves more productive, and we are more productive than we've ever been, it never seems to be enough.
Does all this make you more sad or more angry?
I'm more angry than sad, but the anger is towards people saying there's free trade and fair trade when I know that there's not. The sadness is, you know, seeing an industry that doesn't have to be destroyed over time by the globalization of trade with no plan on how that should be done, just having chaos reign.
We seem determined to remove any excuse we might point to for failure, just when more and more of us are less secure in our jobs than ever. I'm interested in the consolation still available to the unsuccessful when the world doesn't give them the respect that they need.
into a better house, get a better car, buy better clothes. And then when God gets finished, tell him to give you the mic and let you testify.
Over the course of the 19th century, many Christian thinkers, especially in the United States, began to change their views of money and worldly success. Increasingly, in a departure from traditional Christian thought, American Protestant denominations have suggested that wealth might be a reward from God for holiness.
Make money your friend. Touch your neighbor and say, make money your friend.
Make money your friend.
Make all the money you can.
Our friend at Tocqueville also noticed this new American tendency for Christianity to align itself with the materialist values of the rest of the culture. The evangelical mission, he said, appears here to be an industrial enterprise. Bishop Jimmy Ellis III founded the Victory Christian Center in a rundown Philadelphia neighborhood in 1983. His congregation now numbers 1,600.
We need to learn how to become friends with money. You know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, that you, through his poverty, might be rich. And that's not spiritual riches there. People try to make it spiritual. It's not spiritual. The whole chapter is talking about money.
So let me try and understand. So Jesus became poor,
yes,
so that we can become rich on earth.
That's right.
Sunday morning in Levington, Suffolk, England. For centuries, all across the West, people have been coming to services like this. On offer has always been the consoling reminder that there might be more important things in life than status and success. The very fact that we still retain a distinction between wealth and virtue and ask of people whether they're good rather than simply important is in large part due to the impression that Christianity has left on Western consciousness.
For Jesus Christ's sake, our only mediator and advocate.
It's become rather unfashionable to take Christianity all that seriously, in Britain at least, and yet the fact that we don't may be a major cause of our modern status anxieties. We've largely lost the Christian sense that there is no necessary connection between a person's value and their status in the world. For Christians, Jesus had been the highest man, the most blessed, and yet on earth he had been a humble carpenter, ruling out any simple equation between a person's status and their position in heaven. It's worth dwelling on just how much consolation there must have been in that very simple idea.
You can't tell me nothing about this subject because I was poor, but I bless God I ain't poor now. I didn't have no bank account, but I thank my God that I followed him. I thank God. I know what God can do for you if you just follow and obey him.
In the City of God, written in AD 427, in the closing years of the Roman Empire, the theologian St. Augustine explained that all human actions could be interpreted from either a Christian or a Roman perspective. The very things esteemed so highly by the Romans, amassing money, building villas, winning wars, counted for nothing in the Christian outlook. St. Augustine urged Christians to replace Roman values with a new set of concerns, loving one's neighbours, practicing humility and charity, and recognising one's dependence on God. Practicing those values offered the key to elevated Christian status. Over coffee and biscuits at Ian and Margaret Angus's, Canon Geoffrey Grant explained.
How can you tell if someone is spiritually rich? Is that connected to if someone's got quite a lot of income?
Not necessarily, no, I don't think so at all.
Do you think that the Lord rewards people who are good with riches?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, if someone's got a very nice car, doesn't that show that God thinks that this person's quite good?
I don't think so. You get a classic example is Mother Teresa.
Jesus Christ came in order to make us abundant so that we wouldn't have to live in poverty, that we wouldn't have to live in lack. And that is part of the new covenant that he provided.
So there might be people here who've got very little money, but they're very rich spiritually.
Rich spiritually, and that comes out when they come to church. And when you talk to them, they are pillars of the village, and they'll go around and spend their whole lives looking after their neighbours.
On the whole, if you saw, 100 rich people and 100 poor people, would you, in a way, if you had to make a choice, would you say that the richer group was the holier group, not just rich, but also holy, and that the poor group was, in a way, maybe the more sinful group?
No, I would not advocate that at all. I would not advocate that at all. Because riches is not an indication of holiness.
But before you said it was.
Excuse me?
You did say
No, I
before.
said that's a part of it. I was very clear that it's a part of the blessing of God. But you don't have to be rich in order to be holy. Because many rich people are not holy. And many poor people are not holy too. So the riches itself is not holiness, no.
So what overall could we say about riches? I mean, is riches a sign of holiness, or isn't it? I mean, if you had to make a sort of generalization.
Riches is a byproduct of walking with God.
Jeffrey, what's your own attitude towards wealth for yourself?
My car, for instance, is 16 years old.
Why didn't you get a newer one?
Really, because I haven't been able to afford it. And I'd rather have the car I know than buy a second-hand car.
So it doesn't really matter to you what car you drive?
No, I don't, as long as it goes and is reliable. And perhaps that's what God thinks about us.
The Bible does not say money is the root of all evil. The Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. And you can have plenty of it and don't love it. And the key to that is being generous.
How many of the Lord is so good, amen? He's been better to me than I've been to myself. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Coming to hear Bishop Ellis here in Philadelphia, I think what's striking for me is to realize just how much Christianity has been readapted to fit a new American model, to fit the idea of the American dream. And I think what's particularly striking, perhaps to someone coming from Europe, is just how much that consoling message, the traditional message of Christianity, that you could both be poor and spiritually rich, has been lost. And that, I think, is a very troubling lesson indeed.
Until the late 19th century, it was the spires of churches and cathedrals which dominated the skyscape of every town and city in the West. City dwellers engaged in worldly tasks could remind themselves of a vision of life which challenged the authority of ordinary ambitions.
There's no doubt that it's worldly values that have now triumphed over spiritual ones. And there's one aspect of this decline in Christian belief with particular implications for status anxiety. In an age which could believe that what happened to you on earth was but a brief prelude to what might happen in the next life, the pressure to succeed and fulfill yourself would inevitably be lessened. But in a secular age, in which the whole idea of an afterlife has become increasingly unbelievable, the pressure to succeed in this life has inevitably heightened. What you achieve right now in your own life is all that you will ever be. No wonder we're slightly more worried.